Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new episode of Real Business Roundtable. Today is a masterclass for how to start a business. Samir Smithanyan from the Kazakh Alps, from far, far away. He has traveled for this episode. He is behind the camera. Samir?
Hello.
So Samir is going to ask me questions related to starting a business, and I'm going to freestyle this from my noggin. And go.
Alrighty. If you were to find a location to start your business, where would you be looking?
Well, given that a location would make sense for this business, I would try to set it up, especially if it was, B2C, business to consumer. I would try to find an area that had good rent, especially if it's a startup, depending if you're in a funding situation or whatnot. I would try to find a high traffic area that had high visibility, if you're a restaurant or something like that. But if you're a B2B service company, you can get away with being on the third floor, fourth floor of a building in downtown, somewhere that has accessible parking, stuff like that. But it's always good to make sure that you have some type of visibility. Visibility is key, as well as if you get a space for business, make sure that you have enough room to potentially grow. Because if you forecast some growth, that could mean employees.
Alrighty. Next, how would you stand out from the crowd?
This is a big one. This is sort of my core of what I'm passionate about. How you would stand out from the crowd, meaning competitors, is you would first off make sure your brand is positioned in the right light. Make sure that you do things a little bit differently than the competition. Don't follow a certain blueprint. The people who don't follow a blueprint tend to be the most successful because it's unusual, it's different. Focus on driving value, focus on caring about the customer, focus on results, focus on satisfaction, customer service, that type of thing, to the extent where it might feel like it's too much, but it's never too much to the customer. Always go that extra mile, and that alone will differentiate you. Aside from your product or service, having more value or being at a high performance category or something like that. But you always have to remember, to stand out, you have to be different. That's what standing out means. So you have to look at all the areas of your business to make sure that it is something very different and attractive.
Alrighty, this one's kind of a three-parter sort of thing. They all kind of come together. But how would you go about defining your goals, creating a strategy to get things going? How would you go about doing that?
So when you're creating a business, you have to ask yourself, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Where am I doing this? So I always say what, when, where, why, who. Okay? What is it? When are you going to do it? Where are you going to operate? You have to kind of lay these things out. You don't physically have to write it. It helps if you write it, but it's always good to kind of have sort of a plan, either mentally or written down or typed out, of what your strategy is going to be, so you kind of have an idea. You don't have to go crazy with the business plan, but it's always good to try to get stuff in writing and kind of meditate on it to plan what you're going to do.
So kind of on top of that, would that play into, assessing the demand for whatever it is that you're selling or the service or, whatever it is?
So if you're trying to identify demand, you have to sort of look at, okay, there's tools out there that can give you some insight. You can look up, on Google, you can look on the back end, you can look up the search volume. Search volume will give you a real average on what people are looking for or seeking on a monthly average. If those numbers look high, you know that there's a demand. Also, if you see trends out in the marketplace on social channels, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, you see something's kind of blowing up. You're hearing a lot of buzz about it. These are key indicators that there is demand for this. And also just regular everyday observation. Hey, does an industry need this? Are you solving a problem? Are you providing value to that business or that consumer? Or are you trying to fulfill a need or something like that? Because remember, every product has a need or a want, and it's important for you to assess that demand in many different ways. Like I said, trends, do your own research, talk to people from the industry to get an assessment to know that you're making a good move.
Alrighty. This one I feel like is something that we haven't talked about a whole lot, if at all, but how would you go about getting the equipment for your company, like the desks, the chairs, computers? Like, how would you go about doing that?
If you're bootstrapping it, I would start out with the least possible. Try to use some of the stuff that you already have. Like when I first started my company, I used my computer desk from my bedroom. I used the computer desk from my bedroom. Me and my business partner shared it. He would sit on one side. We would see if I would sit on the other. I used a bunch of furniture. I used my home computer when we got our first office. So sometimes you got to bootstrap it. Now, if you're one of these companies that are heavily backed and funded, it doesn't mean you have to go crazy, but you would put that into your business plan that I need to buy this equipment. Or, not a big fan of business loans, but if you get some kind of business loan, and I know startups are a different category, so that might not be as easy. You might want to maybe look for seed capital or angel investors in the beginning to try to help you get that equipment that you need to fulfill.
All right, so next one. How would you, let me see how to phrase this. So let's say you're starting a service and you wanted to do cleaning, for example. Would it be smart to have a plan B set up to have another side hustle, if you will, another side service? Or do you target one thing straight up and then branch out?
It all depends on if you're already established in employment somewhere else, or you have some other side gig that you're doing that's bringing in revenue where you have to supplement. But you should choose one main thing and get really, really good at it and maximize that.
Okay. Next, we're going to kind of go back to the beginning a little bit.
Okay.
Making the leap. Choosing to, yes, I want to start this business. What's that mindset going through your head?
Again, it's a mental game. You have to keep your eyes on the goal. I always tell people, imagine you're on a soccer field, football field, basketball court, and your mind is focused on getting that basketball in the hoop, right? Same thing in business. You're thinking about starting a business. You have to keep your mind and your eyes and your everything about you focused on the goal. Now, in between you and the goal, there are going to be obstacles, right? Don't obsess about the obstacles. It's good to think about them to some extent, but don't let them hinder you or handicap you. Proceed forward, go through the obstacles, and focus on the goal. So you have to take those steps. So to take the leap, to answer your question, you have to just take steps, okay? 1 success, 2 success. They don't have to be big successes, but take those steps, and at least each step you make is progress.
Alrighty, and then what about working with friends and family? Starting a family business kind of thing. Because I know we have a lot of clients that do it, and you and Jay, how does that work?
Well, if you do business with friends and family, just make sure that everyone's getting their job done, everyone's doing their part. If they're not, just have a friendly conversation with them. But with friends and family, you tend to get that level of, for the most part, you tend to get a different level of loyalty, which is why I'm big on relationships. I like to build relationships. So, for example, Samir, I always try to build a relationship with him. I like to show him that I give a shit. It's not like he's just a staff member. No. I care. Let's build something together. And that's how you build a bond, and you build something successful. It's more than just, oh yeah, we're just doing this, or yeah, I like to look at it more like, hey, we're a team, we're in this together, and we're gonna get this done. Friends and family, yeah, you can do it in a way that it works, but you have to pay close attention that certain individuals aren't falling behind.
So, side question, do you feel like it's easier to start a business with family?
I would say yes, because it's all the mindset of the person. So if the person's trustworthy, loyal, wouldn't stab you in the back, wouldn't do anything bad towards you, would work things out normally, civilly, in a friendly manner. That's the type of business partner you want, is someone who has a good head on their shoulders, that's not greedy, that's willing to work through thick and thin. You'll have sometimes, I don't know. I feel like it's I'm a different breed, so I'm more into loyalty. And let's just say, I don't know, like someone wasn't able to do something, I wouldn't criticize them as long as there was something legit going on, or maybe they fell behind. And that's where the loyalty comes in. I know some people disagree with me, whatever. But I'm more of that type of person to stick together through thick and thin and work through it.
Cool. All right. Now it's like, let's say you've kind of established, like, yes, I want to start a business. You kind of know where you're headed. Developing your brand, choosing a name, telling your story, stuff like that. Like how.
So branding is something that I'm pretty good at. When you're trying to, in a story, that's really, really good when you connect a story to businesses, which there always is a backstory. And it's always good to put that story together, kind of mentally document everything. Like where did things start? What sparked the idea? What made it happen? What made it a reality, right? So connecting a story to a business is very beneficial because it allows the client or customer to connect on a human level. And from a branding standpoint, coming up with a name, you have different options. You can come up with like a very standard businessy name like XYZ Incorporated or whatever, or an acronym. Be very careful with acronyms like ABC, CXYZ. Those can be risky, especially if people don't know your name. I know a lot of people, sometimes they use the acronym, but when you say their full name, it sounds good, right? So you want to make sure it doesn't have too many syllables. Short, punchy, fast, easy to remember. Those are important. Make sure you do a search online to make sure that you're not copying anyone's name, you're not violating any trademarks or anything like that. That's super important to keep in mind. But you can do a combination of words. So if your name of your business or the name of your business, say you come up with a name and it's like 3 things or 2 things, you can sometimes try to combine those names together. Or you can look up in a thesaurus synonyms. Like this word means this. Like I'm a bookkeeper. Okay, what is the Greek god of organization or something like that. You can research really cool things or mythical characters and stuff like that. See if the name's being used. By the way, a lot of them are taken. A lot of people scooped up those names like Apollo, Zeus, that. But it's, you can be creative like that, or you can look up words in Latin to try to come up. So if you look up a word, say in English, you can look up the Latin name and try to see. First and foremost, you want to go to like GoDaddy or something like that, see if the domain's available. If you really think you might use it, just buy it. It's $10 or whatever.
Alrighty, now we're going to get into a little bit of logistics here.
Okay.
So like the initial costs coming in, how do you get those, those first sales in the door, and then what do you do with that money, and then how do you go about fulfilling orders and that whole process? So
how do you get the train moving to get sales?
Yeah.
That's an excellent question. So if you're going to build a website, you have to know this right away. For organic reach on search engines, Google, if you build a website and you just bought the domain, don't expect floodgates to come in. Naturally, it's just not going to happen. You need to implement some type of search strategy to drive organic traffic. So what do I mean? Implementing the proper pages, the proper structure that outline each of your products and services, service categories, and then you build out, I don't want to get too technical on SEO, but you make sure it's a proper title, meta description, structure, page breakdown, all that stuff. And then you do want to look into what's referred to as off-page search strategy, which is a whole different bag of chips. I don't know if that's a right term to use, but So you want to have that being worked on. Now, if you need sales quickly while you're working on the indexing or visibility of your website, you can run Facebook ads, you can run Instagram ads, TikTok ads, Google ads during that build-up phase. And then if you like the flow of what's coming in from ads, you can run that too at the same time while you're building up your organic. So that's initially what I would recommend. If you're really desperate to kick off fast, there's tons of vendors out there that have established processes and networks out there that they can generate leads for you. And that can kind of kickstart you in the beginning.
Alrighty. Now we're going to go into a little different territory. Understanding the laws and rules surrounding a business. You know, making sure you know what goes into it, what's required by, like the government and all that stuff, and being on top of it.
Yeah, so before you get into any industry and you have any business idea, you need to make sure that it doesn't require any specific licensing. Trades people, insurance, financial, things like that. You have to make sure that does it require certain licensing? Does it require me to register something with the state? Like, if it's a specific skill. So you have to look into those legalities. You might want to talk to a local business attorney and just say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Do I need to do anything? Or you could just do some diligence online. But I would always recommend speaking to a professional, doing some thorough research before diving into an industry that might have some regulations that you honestly just don't know about, because you don't want to have to deal with that whole mess.
Alrighty, and now what I personally think is pretty big, protecting yourself and the business. How would you put certain things in place to make sure that you're protected?
So, well, the first thing I would think of right off the top of my head is a patent. So let's say you have a widget, something that solves a problem, something that you feel will sell like hotcakes, right? Well, you can patent this with the United States Patent Office, or if your country offers that. But you have to keep in mind, even though you're motivated to get that patent, when you do a patent, first, it has an expiration. And just for preface, I'm not an attorney and I'm not giving out legal advice. I'm just going by my knowledge. If you don't patent, you don't have to give out your secret sauce. So what's your secret sauce? When you patent something, you have to tell literally everything. The process, this, that, how does it work? This, that. So like you guys all probably remember the Keurig cups, the little coffee pods that you put in the coffee machine. Well, to my understanding, they had that patent for a while, a long time. It was only Keurig. And I remember I suddenly saw other companies coming out with this because, according to my understanding and my memory, is that the patent expired. So basically, you give the playbook, you make the playbook public. So a patent isn't always a home run. I would say if you have a business, say you don't go the patent route, say it's not even a product, say it's a service, you have to keep proprietary things protected by not even like in a certain way that if they're provided, the actual process itself, which is the proprietary piece that differentiates you, you have to keep that protected. And there's many ways to go about doing this. I remember years ago, I used to work for a company and there was like a department and I really didn't know how they worked. And they would separate all the different departments, and like that, I believe that's how they protected their business model, was that they separated different things. So if you're working in one section of the business, you don't know how the other, vice versa. So it's all about knowledge. If let's say a competitor gains knowledge on everything that you do exactly to the T, all right, well, now it's just going to become a commodity and you can get copied. So you want to keep some things close to the vest. I know that there's a belief out there that, you should just divulge every detail. And it's like, then what differentiates you? So I feel like you should keep some stuff close to the vest. Say you get a partnership with a vendor that has a product that really hasn't broken into market yet. Well, you can work out some type of exclusive territory deal, a national territory deal, multinational territory deal. and be able to capitalize that. You know, you can work, your protection could be a contract between you and the supplier. Say you work with someone in Ireland and they have a widget and then they're more of a craftsman and they make something. You can take that and get the reseller license on an exclusive basis for, let's say, the United States. That's protection right there. But there's a trade-off. You have to deliver sales. You can't just kick back and go, oh, I got this exclusive. You can't do that.
All right, and the golden thing, investors. Like,
What about it?
So maybe the right time to bring on an investor or not the right time, and kind of being careful about who.
This is definitely a double-edged sword. So you can bootstrap a business and build it all yourself with no investors. When you involve investors, it can muddy the waters. And sometimes, I'm not saying all, sometimes investors could be, God forbid, malicious, and they could just gobble up your company. Like the slightest wrong thing happens. Oh, I'm going to need another 10%. All right, well, my shares were 51%. Now you're taking 10%. Now I own 41. It can become... I'm personally not a big fan of investors because it can just, like, it creates tension that might be unnecessary. I don't think you need investors, especially if it's a sales-driven organization. Now, if you do require significant equipment, property, this, that, okay, you're going to have to maybe work with VC, venture capital, or you're going to have to work with some seed capital. But in my personal opinion, try to avoid it as much as possible. It just makes things very complicated when it doesn't need to be. I like to live a very smooth processing life, and I don't want to muddy or feel like, oh shit. Oh, because at the end of the day, if you get investors, right? You're starting a business, you're working for yourself, right? When you involve, especially big, heavy hitter investors, you're reporting to them. So that, man, I've talked to people and I'm like, they got an idea and I'm like, just sell it. Oh, I'm looking for investors. And I'm like, just sell the product, sell the service. Don't worry about investors right now. See if you can sell it yourself. That's the key to business, is fulfilling a product or service and selling it. It's very, very basic. It's very simple. So I would say try to avoid it at all costs, but in certain situations you have to.
All right, moving on. Setting up your workplace. So like the physical layout of, where your employees work, where you work, and how to make that.
So I'm always on the road, so I typically work from my phone. I rarely work from my home office computer, but if you are, let's say, a graphic designer, web designer, or you're a coder or something like that, building apps, I don't know. You want to make sure that your work environment is comfortable, that you don't feel stressed. You want it to be a very kind of chill, laid back atmosphere where the person can focus. Work environment, you want to make sure people have enough space between each other. So let's say you have 20 employees, make sure they have enough space where they can breathe. They're not on top of each other. So you're going to need maybe proper square footage.
All right, and now website. Just overall, building a good website and making sure it's attracting the right people, how to plan out a website, etc.
So a website should be broken up into very simple sections. You have the home page, which is the first thing that people see. In today's world, we live in a very short attention span world where seeing is believing. People want to see what's going on. It's always good to have a big video banner on the top of your website so they can see what is it you do. What is it that you make? Do you make burgers? Let's show the burgers on the grill. Are you building big, beautiful homes? Let's show a time lapse of you building a big, beautiful home, right? Seeing is believing. Super important. That's the first thing I would put on the top fold. Make sure on the top fold also there's a clear call to action, a phone number, a contact form, a button to email, right? Sometimes you can see a floating, we call it CTA, call to action. There's a floating CTA that's always there when you scroll on the website to call, click, get the address, whatever, email. That's super important. On your homepage, it just should be a general summary, graphically and within text and video, highlighting what you do. Then you should have an About Us page that breaks down who you are. Then you should have a team page if you would like to do that. Some people don't do that. But most importantly, you gotta have products and services pages. And you gotta break down your products and services into categories and have subcategories based on your keyword strategy. So the keyword strategy are, what are the words that you wanna get found for when someone does a Google search? Forget about ads, forget about everything else. The best practice is to make sure that your website itself conveys a message. It facilitates a decision-making process. It has a modern design. It gives people the warm and fuzzies when they see it, right? It looks good. Wow, oh, shit, right? That could be the differentiator that allows someone or gets somebody to say, I want to hire these guys versus these guys. It's just basic design and presentation.
So what about advertising? You know, a little bit more specific, like let's say you're opening a new restaurant and you want to do a big launch for it. You know, how do you utilize social media for that and spreading the word, creating that buzz, you know? That...
So I would recommend creating posts, getting as many video clips as you can, getting a ton of video footage. You can hire you can hire an agency, you can hire a local video producer. Just know if you hire a local video producer, then you're burdened to, okay, I got all these videos, who's gonna post it? Who's gonna do the hashtag strategy? Who's gonna do this? Who's gonna create the actual written content? Now you're scrambling. So it's always better to work with one centralized group of people that are gonna help you with this. And so everything is seamless communication in between professionals within each area, from search to social to content writing to video production, graphic design, photo editing, and social media management. It's better to have it all done by one person. So what happens typically is you'll see people kind of piece things out, which you can run into issues. It's better to have everything cohesive together. But if you have a new business and you're looking to promote it and advertise on social media, the key is content that's going to, in a situation with a restaurant, that will whet the appetite, that will stimulate someone to go, ooh, damn, that pizza looks good. Wow, those birria tacos look so juicy. Or that barbecue looks so good. Ooh, you can see under the lights, you can see the brisket glistening, or you see those fresh wings. Like, that makes people say in their mind, like, yum, I want some of that. And it tends to draw more people in. So remember, content is king. And then I would say a big play for social media advertising is video.
Alrighty, moving on. So this one's gonna be pretty broad, but there's a lot underneath it. So like just managing everything, managing a team, your business, your finances, the budgets coming in, cash flow.
So if you're a solopreneur, which this can be the portion that will sometimes make it difficult, is that if you as an entrepreneur are really good at sales, building relationships, stuff like that, it's always good to partner up with someone that can handle that management, client services, that type of thing, project management, the whole nine. And then just standard business paperwork and stuff like that. So it's always good to partner up with someone that will handle that side, vice versa.
So when do you think would be a good time to acquire a manager? Like, let's say you're an owner, you're setting up a business. When's that point that you're like, okay, I need an extra set of hands to take some of the load off? When
the client load gets high enough that it is impacting your ability to manage everyone properly, where it becomes just too much, and everybody can handle a different amount. So people have different thresholds. Same thing as if you have a project manager, a client services person, there's a limit where that would require another manager.
So what do you think that line would be? Like, if you feel like you're hitting a certain point of like stress, where you're like losing sleep at night, like at that point do you go for it? Or if it's, you're losing clients, like, okay.
Well, you obviously want to make sure you're delivering, but then you also want to make sure, like, is it impacting your role within your own company? So if you're starting a business and you get some traction, you get some sales, and you're kind of feeling like, like I'm hitting a point, then you have to explore some type of office manager, project manager of some sort like that to help with the additional effort.
So what about maintaining momentum? So, your new business, you start with there's a bunch of hype there, and then after about a year, it kind of starts to go down. How do you keep that momentum going to keep you moving forward?
It has to be totally 100% promotion, advertising, marketing, sales, business development, outreach, everything under the sun as a more diversified omni-channel approach. So you have your different approaches to promotion. Promotion is the seed of a sale, right? You promote, run ads, do all that stuff, do outreach, and then you get some interest, and then you sell, right? That's super important to keep that train moving. Don't just sell. A lot of people that do the word of mouth or all I have is referrals crap. I don't care what they say. There's always hills and valleys. I don't care. That is such a pipe dream. And what's weird is people who rely on referrals, they're so proud. Like they're so overly proud about it. Oh, I never advertised in my entire life, in my career. And I've actually spoken to some of these folks, and their sales are exactly the same from 1977. No lie. I've talked to people, and they're like, yeah, I never had to advertise. How long have you been at this level? Since 1977, running strong. I'm like, so in 1977, your sales were whatever. And they capped out, and they just stayed. So literally, the business owner thought he was like a big shot by not promoting his business. And it stayed the same for, I don't know, for 40, 50 years? Yeah, crazy, insane. Anyways.
So at what point would you feel like you would need to start improving the business? Like making your services quicker or more efficient?
You should always look to improve across the board. So efficiency, getting work done faster, more cost effective, finding high performance employees that understand that. Moving slow is not going to do anybody a favor. We all know the famous story where I had a professional working for us, and I did the math, and it was for one item that would normally take, I don't know, a week. It took them 3 months, and it was a complete. We did the math, and we're like, what is going on? You got to make sure your employees, your staff, your contractors, whoever, that they're operating efficiently. And remember, if someone is paid by the hour, they are incentivized to work slow, and you have to pay attention to speed and efficiency, which is very important. Because according to certain state laws, you have to pay hourly, and that's a given. So as an entrepreneur, you have to figure that out, right? You have to figure out, okay. And another important thing is whether someone is categorized as a contractor or a W-2 employee. They have to be categorized as a W-2 employee if they're like a main piece of your business. You're giving them, you're setting their hours and stuff like that, but you have to make sure that those hourly employees are producing at an efficient. I'm not saying you got to be the Flash, but just get the work done.
So I know AI is, coming out, and, a lot of businesses are starting to incorporate it, but technology overall, staying up to date on it, even not just AI, but like down to the POS system that you might be using. If it's like a really old model, benefits of improving it, or a new pizza oven, that kind of thing. So like, how would you stay on top of technology and making sure that you continue to grow with the times?
Well, to preface that, I always believe that every business should lead through revenue. So first and foremost, your marketing and your sales need to be firing on all 8 cylinders before investing in equipment or inventory or more space or a second location. You have to maximize with what you have, justify the reason to buy said inventory or expanded space or more equipment, justify it with more sales. Some people do the opposite, which is a complete train wreck. Oh, I'm going to buy this $2 million machine and I'm going to just hope it comes in. Here it comes. Like that's a disaster. Lead with revenue first, right? Then it justifies, hey, we have this revenue coming in. Okay, we have to fulfill, right? So they meet revenue. Okay, justify it, get the equipment, deliver.
So there's a bagel shop in, our town where we're located that will only accept cash. Do you think that type of thing, and they're still in business, they've been in business for a long time, but do you think that's smart to keep it as is if it's working, or do you think, they should really be
I disagree. I don't think that's a good look. Maybe in the 1960s, that would be acceptable. When you're cash only, whatever, you can run your business the way you want, but if you're cash only, it could make people wonder and think things that might not be so savory, even though it's probably innocent, right? I don't know. I think that cash only in today's world is probably less accepted or appreciated than 40 years ago, 50 years ago. I think in today's world where we're moving towards more cashless, debit cards, credit cards, things like that, it's more, you got to get with the times. And I do think that it could hinder, because sometimes people, all they have on them, all they have on them is a credit card. Like, oh, yeah. Shit,
Expanding your business, when do you think the right time would be to kind of look at another location or just growing in size?
Well, you should grow only at a pace that you can handle. So if your product or service requires some type of pre-process to handle said increased growth, you first grow with sales, then you have the employees, if they can handle it, fulfill, or you order more supply or you order more product from your manufacturer. This is where things can get tricky, is you have to do it in a manageable way that you don't fall behind on production. You don't fall behind on fulfillment. You don't fall behind on these things. These things are called bottlenecks, and they do nothing but upset the customer and the client. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah, it's great to get $1 gazillion in sales, but can you handle that? Can you do it? I once had a client that, they wanted to increase, what was it, 4? Yeah, they wanted to 4X their business in a year, and they did. We did it. He was doing X, and we 4X'd it in 1 year. Word on the street was he could barely handle it. I found out through certain people that knew the individual, and wow. So it's always good to grow at a manageable clip. And a manageable clip is based on your assessment of what your current infrastructure, process, team, technology, whatever you use to fulfill, manufacturer, whoever, check with them first. Hey, Joe, Mr. Manufacturer, Miss Manufacturer, I'm going to do a promotional campaign. Can I increase by 30% in the next 6 months? They'll say yes or no. If they say no, say, how do we get there? Don't let that manufacturer hold you back. Or you assess your team's output. Can we handle 30% more business? Maybe give some of the employees overtime, whatever, right? You have to assess that right away. And that's a pretty quick analysis to identify what you can handle.
So how important do you think it is to be ready to pivot? Obviously COVID happened and, a lot of businesses sank or swim. And that's a great example of, pivoting and changing your direction within your company. So how do you feel about that? Being ready to pivot? Or is there a time not to pivot and just to keep
So you should pivot if you see things going in a certain direction. You should pivot. You should make those changes, or at least start the process to implement and move with the times. You can't be stuck in the 90s. You can't be... Like one time I had a guy, he purchased a company that we blew up the sales. Guy retired that loved us, and he sold the business, and the guy goes, I don't need to do this stuff. I'm going to go all in on radio. Well, I'm telling you guys, we got calls from their vendors.
Jesus Christ.
The vendors go, what the hell's going on? I don't know. What the F is going on? Why? What happened? What happened? Now you got to remember, you blow up somebody's sales. The providers to said business are very happy. They're like, wow, I'm getting all this business. They're doing some marketing stuff. They're doing really good. So all the vendors to the business are super happy. But if the owner shifts gears and dramatically changes said strategy, well, guess what? Things may not go so well. And then it will trickle down to the vendors, and then the vendors stop making calls, trying to figure out what's going on. And I've seen this happen a few times. I am just the messenger, and I try to guide folks the right way. And when that was said to me, I just knew. Let's keep our cool on the show.
Holy moly.
I don't want that to happen. I wish the radio worked really well for this person, but holy smokes.
Oh my lordy.
What? He was a slightly older gentleman. And I don't know if, back in the, what do they call it? The old days in the 50s, the Christmas Story when when they go, hey, the Ovaltine thing, and he's like, listening to the radio. Maybe that was his time where the radio was killer and it was everything that people listened to. But man.
Yeah. Alrighty, so we've gone through a lot here. I got one last question for you. When do you think the right time? So let's say, successful business, everything's going well, you're starting to get old. When's the right time to sell your business or move on, both personally and within the business?
So selling your business is for a couple reasons. Some not so good. So if you come down with some type of terminal illness, God forbid, and you have to get out of the business just to kind of cool it, low stress. You don't necessarily have to sell. You could find somebody that's super trustworthy to run it for you. Or if you are forced to sell the business, you would sell it in that situation. Or if you're getting old and you want to retire, say you're 50, 60, 70, and you don't really want to bother with it anymore, and you just want to sell it and then retire. Or another person who has other things going on and other projects that they want to put their focus on, because a person only has 8 hours in a day. They want to put their focus into something else, right? They're going to sell their business. So I would say retirement, focusing on a different project, illness, God forbid. Or if there's just something going on where it is, it might be a better strategy to maybe sell the business and invest in, I don't know, real estate or something like that. There's a ton of reasons why, but I would say the main two would be other projects and retirement. So I hope you enjoyed this different episode of Real Business Roundtable. I just wanted to switch it up a little bit, kind of make it sort of like a masterclass. Not too overly formal, but we wanted to cover some basics. So if you are, thinking about starting a business, hopefully some of the information I gave will give you some insight on things to consider so you have a successful path. Again, we put out this show, we put out this information just to give back and give people some guidance, because we literally witness a lot of people making mistakes, not intentionally. Just to avoid the flounder and making bad moves in business, we want to put out this information because we get exposed to a lot. We work with a lot of people, and we just want everyone to be successful and make sure that their business entrepreneurship journey is as successful as possible. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, show some love. We'll catch you later. We have Sam. Oh my God.
The timing of that.
You're going to put that blooper at the end. You're going to put the blooper at the end. Oh my God. Let's,
Oh